Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we're back one more time with my home theater series, and I'm going to take you on a tour of my home theater upstairs in a second. And I thought I was done until last weekend, and I was poking around on Amazon, and I said, you know what is it going to take to get the full Atmos sound? And as it turns out, all I needed was more speakers, and I bought a pair. This is a Klipsch R14SA, and it is a upward firing speaker that sits on top of my front channel speakers. The pair cost about $400, not cheap, but there are less expensive upward shooting Atmos speakers out there if you're looking to put together something for less money. I went with these because I have a huge set of front channel speakers that I'm going to show you in a minute, and I needed something that could at least compete with those speakers so that I didn't have these get overpowered, and I had to do some configuration to get these things working just right. But I will say, the Atmos experience, I think if you're really into movies, is probably worth investing in. I was really quite pleased with it, and I'll tell you all about it here in just a second. But I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that everything you're about to see upstairs I paid for with my own funds, including the speakers here. All the opinions you're about to hear are my own. Nobody is paying for this review, and no one has reviewed or approved what you're about to see before I uploaded it. So here is the speaker. There's nothing fancy about Atmos speakers. In fact, you could get any speaker and just angle it correctly and probably get this to work as well. It just plugs in like any other speaker would. You do need an Atmos compatible receiver, and I'll show you the one that I bought a little while ago so you can get a feel for how these speakers connect. And they do sell now, first of all, less expensive Atmos speakers if you don't want to have something as expensive as this one. And they also sell Atmos speakers that are all integrated, so you can get the front channel speakers integrated with the presence speakers in a single unit. So there are a lot of things popping up now on Amazon. I think the cost of the receivers is coming down, so this is going to be something that I think will be very accessible this year, even if you're on a budget for your home theater system. And the first movie I watched, of course, was my Star Wars film. Star Wars has cost me a lot of money over the years for my home theater systems, because I'm always trying to keep up with whatever new audio and video technologies they're introducing. And this film has Dolby Vision, which prompted me to get that Dolby Vision Blu-ray player from Sony that I reviewed a couple of weeks ago. And of course, it prompted me to get the new television, and now it's prompted me to get the Atmos speakers, because this film supports everything, and it was mixed in Dolby Atmos from the start. So you're getting exactly what the directors and audio engineers wanted you to hear. And it's basically the same soundtrack you heard in the theater. Lossless audio on the Blu-ray here, and just tremendously good sound. And the Atmos experience has been a nice upgrade for me. I don't want to say it was groundbreaking based on what I had before, which sounded great to begin with, but it adds a dimensionality to the sound. You will start hearing things that might sound like they're coming from above you. There was one scene where the First Order is attacking the ship with Princess Leia, or General Leia on it, and you'll hear the klaxons coming out of your ceiling, and there's some things that they did really well on the audio mixing. And throughout the film, what I noticed with this, because I had just watched the film prior to hooking the speakers up to get a good feel for the differences, is that you hear you don't hear the separation of your speakers like you used to. So I used to be able to say, oh, I can hear that sound coming out of my right speaker and this one coming out of the left. Now it's kind of filling up a space, and you basically have sound that's going over the border between the speakers, if that makes sense. So a lot of times I'd be able to hear what was coming out of the center speaker, and then I could hear something separate from the left speaker. These really fill it in a way that was noticeable, and is very noticeable, especially when you turn it off and go back to having no Atmos sound at all. And that was a big change there, and I really was quite impressed with just how nice it sounded and how it didn't feel like a gimmick. And again, you're hearing stuff from above you, you're getting a much more of a presence of sound, which is why they call these presence speakers. And now I'm thinking like I want to get a pair of rear presence speakers, because my receiver is a 9-channel receiver, and I could put a pair of these in the back now too. So I'm getting a little out of control here, but hopefully we'll take it a step at a time. Now what I wanted to do was show you the receiver that I'm using, because you do have to get the right receiver to get this Atmos support. So the first thing you want to look for is Dolby Atmos support. And what happened with me, and I talked about this in prior videos, is that when I bought my TV, my receiver that I had for about 8 or 9 years wasn't compatible with the TV because it didn't support the 4K copy protection that is on these Blu-ray discs. And there were some workarounds. Some of these Blu-ray players, like the one I have have dual outputs on their HDMI, so I could have gotten the audio to the receiver. But I said, you know what, let me just get a new one. I'll sell the old one, and I'll get Atmos and everything so I can have some room to grow into this over time. And I have these huge speakers, so I needed something with a little bit more power to it. So what I ended up choosing was the Yamaha RX-A 2070. I had a Yamaha receiver before. I really liked it. It was one of the best sounding receivers I've owned. And this one is an improvement on that. Not cheap, but they've got different price levels here based on how much power you need per channel. So this one does 140 watts per channel max, which is what I needed because I have big speakers both in the front and back. So I wanted to power those speakers with enough power to get it done for me. So that is why I went with this one. And what's cool about it is that it's got this microphone that you can see down here, and a lot of these receivers now have this. So when you initially calibrate the sound, you take that microphone and you put it right where you plan to sit most of the time to watch your movies, and it will calibrate the volume of each channel independently to get the best sound. I think it even adjusts some of the latency between different speakers, and I found right out of the gate, initially when I hooked it up, that everything sounded really nice. I did tweak some of the levels a little bit, and I was pleased with some of the improvements that individual tweaking did, but the microphone was a good place to start, which is what I did to get everything going. And then when I added the speakers to the mix here, I reran that process and then started watching the movie. I was hearing the speakers doing their thing, and I decided, though, I wanted a little bit more to this, so I did end up going into the interface on the receiver. It's got a really nice graphical user interface, and I did bump up the volume on these to full blast to give me enough of that sound to not overpower the front channel speakers, but at least complement them, because I think they were getting drowned out a little bit by the rather large speakers that I had there. So this is what the receiver looks like. Again, I'll show this to you upstairs in just a second, but it's easier to see it here on screen. I forgot to mention how much I paid for this, $1,600. Yes, it is expensive, but this is the home theater market. If you want nice, you gotta pay for nice. On the front panel here, you've got a couple of inputs along with some controls. So you get a lot of the remote control settings on the receiver itself, which is good to have just in case you want to do something while you're sitting next to it. There's also an HDMI and an audio input here too. So one of the things that I really liked about this is that it has a ton of inputs on the back here. So in addition to that front HDMI input, we've got 7 more here on the back. All of them support HDCP 2.2, so I can get 4K 60 Hertz on every port on this device. And I've got a lot of stuff that I'm plugging in. The nice thing is that the remote just can switch between them very easily, retains the configuration that I have on each, and it is a very simple process. The other cool thing is that because this supports HDMI CEC, I can use the receiver remote to control the television. I can control the NVIDIA Shield with it, so I don't have to keep swapping remotes out as often as I was before. And this might be really useful, especially if you have an older television, because if your TV doesn't support HDMI CEC, your receiver now will. So as long as you get that receiver booted up, you can then start using a single remote, in this case the receiver remote, with everything, and that might be helpful, especially if you have family members like my wife who doesn't like to have 1,200 remotes out in front of her before she pops in there. The zone out here is what I use to run my video out to the television. There's also an audio return version here too, so you can have audio going out of the receiver to some other device. You can have it run back to the television, for example, if you wanted to do that for some reason. It's also got composite video inputs, 4 of them, which my TV kind of lacks. I think there's a little dongle cable for my television to get some composite in there, but this one has a much easier point of entry here. I was hoping that it would have S-Video for some of my 90s game consoles and my Laserdisc player, but it does not. But it does have 2 component inputs, which is another thing that my main TV pretty much lacks at this point. You do have some pre-out settings here too, so you can run basically preamp out of the receiver and have the audio decoded inside of it. This is also where I plug my subwoofer into. Right now I just have a rear subwoofer, but I'm contemplating adding one to the front just for the heck of it, because I have the ability to do that. So I think I might be doing that in the near future. On the bottom here is where all the speakers plug in. So we've got our center channel here. I've got my front channel speakers right here, and then my surround back speakers here. And that's your typical 5.1 channel setup there. Now my new Dolby Atmos speakers I've plugged in right over here to the extra SP1 front presence section on the back, and if I wanted to add rear presence speakers, I would add them over here. Now this receiver is a 9-channel receiver, which means that if I had my typical 7.1.1 setup, I would have to choose between rear presence or the extra set of rear speakers. So remember, in a 7.1 channel setup, you have your surround speakers and then you have your back speakers. Because this only supports 9 channels, you'd have to give up perhaps the surround speakers, leave your back ones on, and add the extra presence on top of the back ones, which I think is probably just fine. So that's the only limitation this one has, is that I can't have all of this stuff going at the same time. I do have to give up something if I want to add in those rear presence speakers, but at the moment I don't have a 7.1 system, so I would not be giving up anything. So let's go upstairs and let's take a look and see how all of this is configured and what I have plugged into it. So here we are in the home theater room. It's a bit of a mess up here. We're not going to show you the other side of this room. And here, of course, is the TV. This is the LG C7 that I reviewed back around the holiday season. I'm going to put a playlist down below so you can see all of the stuff that is in this room here, because there's a lot of things. So this is the cornerstone of the whole shebang, 4K set. It is a beautiful picture on this, and I'm really excited about how the OLED prices have come down as far as they have to make this a very accessible TV for people. So let's take a look at the speakers here, and then we'll work our way through some of the hardware. So you can see how the Atmos speakers go here. I'm still tweaking this a little bit. I have to figure out the best configuration, partly because I've got this the ceiling here just kind of tilts up this way and then it goes flat, so I'm not sure, this might not be the best place for it given how they want you to configure these things. So I'm going to find some demos on YouTube. I think there are a few Atmos demos that I'm going to play with. So those are the speakers. You can see how they're configured, and then beneath them are these monsters that my wife came to the marriage with. And it was funny, she came, when we got married, she came in with these speakers, a Sega CDX, which was the Genesis combo thing, and all this other stuff. So it was really funny to have her like show up with these great speakers that her dad had given her. So these are JBL CL120s. They sound great, especially for this home theater thing. Very loud, obviously. There's a lot of power going into these things. I think these were out in 1995 or so. So these are old, but you know, really for audio, you don't need new all the time. And this was something that really worked out nicely. So those are the front channel speakers. In the center here, we have a Klipsch center channel that I bought a little while ago. I needed something a little louder when I got those center channel speakers, so I ended up getting this center channel. They look nice even with the grill off, actually, and you can see what it looks like here. This is providing a lot of good audio for the dialogue in the films, and it made a big difference over the smaller one that I had a little earlier. I'll talk about all these components here in a second. We got the other speakers here. So again, front presence on the left and the front right speaker. We'll go back here briefly to where we have the rear speakers. These are VR120s or VR20s from Boston Acoustics. These speakers I bought probably also around 1995, 96 on one of my original home theaters at my mom's house when I was still in college, and I've transitioned them into rear speakers. So I've got one here and one over there. This is not a very big space for a home theater, so you get really good sound. Again, big speakers for big sound because I wanted to match what I had in the front. Now the subwoofer I have here is an extinct species. This is something from a company called Elemental Designs. They were making subwoofers for automobiles and then started making home theater components that were very inexpensive for the time. This is, I think, got a 200-watt amplifier. It's a 12-inch subwoofer. It is really awesome, but unfortunately, you can't get one anymore. I don't even think I paid all that much for it, and it's unfortunate because it is a great sub. So let's go back over here, and I'll show you all the components. So the receiver is down here. That's the one we just spent some time on in the studio, so it's all hooked up and running for us. I've got an NVIDIA Shield Pro here. Now what's funny is, and I was talking to James who's behind the camera about this, when I started doing some of this home theater stuff in this room, I had one box to rule them all, which was the NVIDIA Shield, but over time, more boxes have been finding their way back into the mix. So we've got some more stuff here because Analog came out with these great little retro game consoles. So this is their NT Mini that I bought a few months ago. This runs Super Nintendo games, and it runs it better than anything else on the market, and it looks great on this TV, so I put that in there. We have another analog console here on the other side. This is the NT Mini, which runs the Nintendo games, but it also runs all of the other consoles from the 80s perfectly with its FPGA chip on board. So I keep this up here because I have friends come over. We play our old Atari games on this beautiful TV. Isn't that crazy? Over here, we've got the Apple TV 4K. I bought it to review a while ago, and it's interesting enough for me to hang on to because I think there's going to be some new developments. Dolby Vision is coming to it actually, it's got Dolby Vision now. Dolby Atmos is coming to it very shortly, so I'm going to do a little bit more with this on the channel. Down here is the new Blu-ray player that we reviewed last week, the Xbox One S. It still has a place here in the room, and that is it for components, and I'm sure more stuff will probably find its way there soon. Actually, there's one more thing. Behind the TV here, I bought an extra dock for my Switch, so when I'm up here, I can dock my Switch and play Fortnite or whatever I'm playing that particular day, and that's plugged into the TV. So that is the home theater room. Pretty basic stuff here, but it's working great for me. And it shows you that you can really piece this together over time. You might have some old speakers kicking around that might work really well for you. So don't feel like you have to go out and buy all this new stuff right away. See what you have, because these speakers connect to the receiver the same way they did 25 years ago. In fact, I've probably got some speakers at my mom's house from the 70s that would probably work okay. So don't go out and buy new speakers just because you think you need to. See what you got. But the receiver really is important. If you want Atmos, you're going to pay a little bit more. But I do think as time goes on, especially with this 4K Blu-ray, it is probably worth doing. So let me know what you think down in the comments below. And we'll probably be back with more based on questions that you have for this video. So please leave them down below, and we'll have some good ideas for follow-ups. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold-level supporters of the Black Eyed and Blues Music Hour podcast: Chris Allegretta, Tom Albrecht, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.